What would you do if the person you humiliated was the only one capable of saving the life of someone you love? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Sabrina, a middle-aged woman with Afro-Brazilian features and curly hair pulled back into a stylish bun, parks her car in the crowded lot of the local supermarket. Dressed in casual yet refined clothing, she hurriedly exits the vehicle, checking her wristwatch. The afternoon sun reflects off her sunglasses as she grabs her purse from the passenger seat. Sabrina has only a few minutes to pick up essential groceries before returning to the hospital for an emergency surgery. The parking lot is bustling with activity, with carts being pushed and families carrying bags. She walks quickly towards the supermarket entrance, her low heels echoing on the asphalt. Her mind is already cataloging the items she needs to buy: milk, bread, fresh fruit, and perhaps a pack of coffee for the long nights on call. Little does she know that her routine is about to be drastically interrupted by an event that will change her perspective on the community she has served for years. Suddenly, a commanding voice cuts through the air, causing Sabrina to stop abruptly. "Hey, you there! Stop where you are!" Officer Miller, a burly man with a thick mustache and cold eyes, advances toward her with heavy steps. His dark blue uniform is immaculate, but his expression is one of pure hostility. Without any explanation or courtesy, he grabs Sabrina's arm, his hand gripping with unnecessary force. "You're under arrest for suspected theft," he declares, his voice laden with accusation. Sabrina, stunned, tries to pull away, her voice trembling with indignation and fear. "What are you talking about? I haven't stolen anything." But Miller doesn't listen. His eyes scan Sabrina's body, searching for non-existent evidence of a crime she didn't commit. The injustice of the situation is palpable, and the air around them seems to thicken with tension. Other shoppers begin to notice the scene, their curious and concerned gazes turning toward the unexpected confrontation. Within seconds, the parking lot transforms. What was an ordinary shopping day now becomes a disturbing spectacle. People stop their activities, drawn by the confrontation between Sabrina and Officer Miller. A young mother, with a baby in her arms, is the first to pull out her smartphone, aiming the camera at the unfolding scene. Soon, others follow her example. Teenagers, elderly people, workers on their lunch break, all become digital witnesses to the incident. The sound of notifications and camera clicks fills the air, blending with murmurs of indignation and speculation. Some bystanders whisper among themselves, questioning the officer's actions, while others shout words of encouragement to Sabrina. The crowd quickly grows, forming a semicircle around the two protagonists. The tension is palpable, and the situation threatens to escalate at any moment, with every move being captured and potentially shared for the world to see. With a racing heart and a trembling voice, Sabrina tries to remain calm in the face of blatant injustice. "Officer, please, listen to me. I am Dr. Sabrina Oliveira, Chief Neurosurgeon at Central Hospital. I can show you my ID." Her hands shake as she tries to reach for her purse, but Officer Miller interrupts her abruptly. "Shut up. I've heard that kind of story before," he growls, his eyes flashing with distrust and prejudice. Completely ignoring Sabrina's protests and the growing murmurs of the crowd, Miller pulls out a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The cold metal contrasts with Sabrina's warm skin as he cuffs her wrists with excessive force. Humiliation burns on her face as she looks around, silently pleading for help. Her years of study, her professional status, her humanity, all seem to have been reduced to nothing in this moment of raw injustice. Suddenly, a young, energetic voice cuts through the tension. "Wait, I know her." A young man, about 20 years old, wearing a t-shirt from the local hospital, pushes his way through the crowd. His eyes are bright with recognition and indignation. "This is Dr. Sabrina Oliveira. She saved my sister's life last month." The young man, trembling with emotion, addresses Officer Miller directly. "She's a famous neurosurgeon, one of the best in the country. How can you do this to her?" His voice echoes through the parking lot, amplified by the crowd that now murmurs in shock and understanding. Smartphones are raised even higher, capturing the dramatic revelation. Sabrina's face lights up with a mix of relief and gratitude, while Officer Miller visibly pales, the realization of his monumental mistake beginning to set in. Officer Miller, now visibly uncomfortable, hesitates for a moment. Sweat starts to form on his forehead as he processes the information. With slow and reluctant movements, he finally removes the handcuffs from Sabrina's wrists. I apologize for the misunderstanding, Doctor," he mutters, his voice losing its previous arrogance. However, unable to fully admit his mistake, Miller tries to save face. "But we still need to follow protocol. I'll have to search your car." Sabrina, massaging her sore wrists, looks at him with a mixture of incredulity and fatigue. The crowd around them raises their protests, voices rising in defense of the wronged doctor. Ignoring the public outcry, Miller moves toward Sabrina's car, determined to carry out his unfounded search, while cameras continue to record every movement of this unfolding drama. As Officer Miller steps away to inspect her vehicle, Sabrina's cell phone starts ringing insistently in her purse. With still trembling hands, she answers the call. Her expression changes instantly from exhaustion to professional concern. "Dr. Oliveira speaking," she says, her voice regaining some of its usual firmness. On the other end of the line, a colleague's urgent voice informs her of a critical emergency at the hospital, a patient with a brain aneurysm about to rupture. Sabrina looks around, the supermarket parking lot now seeming surreal compared to the life at stake. She turns to Miller, who is still rummaging through her car. "Officer, I need to leave immediately. A life is at risk." The urgency in her voice is palpable, contrasting sharply with the scene of humiliation moments ago. The crowd, realizing the gravity of the situation, begins to disperse, making way for the doctor. The sound of the hospital's automatic doors closing behind Sabrina momentarily isolates her from the outside world. The icy air conditioning sharply contrasts with the heat of the humiliation still burning on her cheeks. Her steps echo through the familiar hallways. But today, everything feels different, distorted by the lens of recent trauma. Colleagues and nurses greet her with smiles and nods, unaware of the emotional turmoil she carries. Sabrina forces a smile in return, her professional mask threatening to crack at any moment. She heads to the doctor's locker room, her hands still trembling slightly as she turns the lock on her locker. As she changes into her familiar white coat, Sabrina tries to pull herself together. She takes a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. Images from the parking lot invade her mind. The cold handcuffs, the curious stares, Officer Miller's accusatory voice. She shakes her head, trying to push the memories away. In the locker room mirror, Sabrina studies her reflection. Her eyes, usually bright and confident, now carry a shadow of doubt and hurt. She adjusts the stethoscope around her neck, a gesture so routine it almost comforts her. "You are Dr. Sabrina Oliveira," she murmurs to herself, "one of the best neurosurgeons in the country. Don't let one incident define who you are." With one last deep breath, Sabrina straightens her shoulders and exits the locker room. The hospital awaits her. Lives depend on her. But as she walks toward the operating room, she can't shake the feeling that something fundamental has changed. The world she knew, the respect she thought she had earned, suddenly seems fragile and uncertain. Sabrina enters the prep room, her mind already focusing on the medical challenge ahead. The head nurse, Maria, greets her with a clipboard and a concerned look. "Dr. Oliveira, we have a..." complicated situation with the revolutionary surgery patient. Intrigued, Sabrina takes the patient's chart. Her eyes quickly scan the information until a name makes her heart skip a beat. Miller, Lucas, father, John Miller. She looks at Maria, seeking confirmation. "Yes, doctor," Maria whispers. "He's the son of Officer Miller from the local police." The world seems to spin for a moment. Sabrina leans on the table, trying to process the cruel irony of fate. The son of the man who publicly humiliated her just a few hours ago now depends on her to survive. How is this possible?" Sabrina murmurs, more to herself than to Maria. The nurse quickly explains. Lucas Miller, 17, was in a car accident the previous night. Tests revealed a rare neurological condition requiring the innovative technique Sabrina had developed. Sabrina closes her eyes, taking a deep breath. Images of the parking lot mix with those of young Lucas in the hospital bed. She feels a whirlwind of emotions: anger, fear, compassion, doubt. "Does Officer Miller know I'm the surgeon?" she asks, her voice trembling slightly. Maria shakes her head. "Not yet. He's in the waiting room, desperate. He couldn't bring himself to see his son before the surgery." Sabrina looks again at the chart, at the photo of Lucas, a smiling, lively young man. She feels the weight of responsibility, not just as a doctor, but as a human being. The decision she makes in the next few moments will not only affect Lucas's life, but also redefine who she is as a person and a professional. The news spreads quickly through the medical team. Dr. Carlos, the anesthesiologist, is the first to approach Sabrina directly. "Dr. Oliveira, you can't perform this surgery. It's a clear conflict of interest." Sabrina, still processing the situation, looks at her gathered colleagues. Concerned and skeptical faces stare back at her. Dr. Amanda, a young resident, intervenes. "Dr. Sabrina, we heard about the incident in the parking lot. No one would blame you for passing this case on." The prep room becomes a battleground of opinions and ethical concerns. Voices overlap, some defending Sabrina's withdrawal, others expressing concern about potential legal and media repercussions. "What if something goes wrong during the surgery?" questions Dr. Rodrigo, the assistant surgeon. "Officer Miller could claim it was intentional, a revenge." Sabrina feels the weight of every word, every look. She understands her team's concerns, but something inside her rebels against the idea of abandoning a patient, regardless of the circumstances. "I understand everyone's concerns," Sabrina finally speaks, her voice calm but firm. "But our priority here is the patient. Lucas Miller needs this surgery, and I am the most qualified to perform it." Silence falls over the room. Dr. Carlos steps forward, his expression serious. "Sabrina, think carefully. This could ruin your career if it doesn't go well. No one here doubts your abilities, but the risk—" Sabrina looks at each member of her team, seeing the mix of concern and respect in their eyes. She knows her decision will affect not only her, but all of them. "I appreciate your concern," she says, her voice gaining strength. "But I became a doctor to save lives, regardless of who the patient or their family is. I won't abandon my principles out of fear or resentment." The tension in the room is palpable. Some team members exchange worried glances. Others seem to gain newfound respect for Sabrina. The decision is made, but the consequences remain uncertain. Officer John Miller bursts through the hospital doors, his uniform wrinkled and his face marked with desperation. His eyes, usually hard and authoritative, are now red and swollen from crying. He approaches the reception desk, his hands trembling as he grips the edge of the counter. "My son," he gasps, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Lucas Miller. He's going to be operated on. I need to know how he is." The receptionist, recognizing the father's anguish, quickly checks the information. "Mr. Miller, Your son is being prepared for surgery as we speak. The medical team is doing everything they can. Miller paces back and forth in the waiting room, unable to sit down. Other patients and family members watch him with a mix of sympathy and apprehension, noticing his police uniform and agitated state. "Who is the surgeon?" Miller asks abruptly, turning to the receptionist. "I want to speak with them. I need to know my son is in good hands." The receptionist hesitates, aware of the delicate situation. "The chief surgeon is one of the best neurosurgeons in the country, sir. Your son is receiving the best possible care." Miller nods, but the anxiety in his eyes doesn't diminish. He steps away, running his hands through his graying hair. His thoughts are a whirlwind of fear and regret. He recalls the argument he had with Lucas the night before, the harsh words exchanged before his son stormed off in the car. As he waits, Miller has no idea that the doctor he humiliated hours earlier is the same person now fighting to save his son's life. Fate has woven a complex web of redemption and judgment, and Miller is at its center, completely unaware. A nurse approaches, offering a cup of water and words of comfort. Miller accepts, with a silent nod, his mind miles away, in the operating room where his son's future, and perhaps his own, is being decided. The silence in the prep room is broken by the firm sound of Sabrina's voice. "Let's proceed with the surgery," she announces, her decision surprising everyone present. The eyes of her team turn to her, a mix of shock, admiration, and concern evident on their faces. Dr. Carlos, the anesthesiologist, is the first to react. "Sabrina, are you sure? The implications of this—" She interrupts him with a gentle but determined gesture. "I'm sure, Carlos. Our duty is to the patient, not the circumstances." Sabrina begins to prepare, meticulously washing her hands. As the antiseptic soap foams between her fingers, she reflects on the magnitude of her decision. Every movement is deliberate, almost meditative. "I want everyone to understand," she says, turning to face her team. "What happened in the parking lot stays out there. In here, we are professionals with one goal: to save this young man's life." The determination in her voice is contagious. Slowly, the team begins to move, preparing for the surgery. Dr. Amanda, the young resident, approaches Sabrina. "Dr. Oliveira, I admire your courage," she murmurs. Sabrina smiles slightly, feeling the weight of responsibility. "It's not courage, Amanda. It's duty." As she dons the surgical gown, Sabrina feels a surprising calm settle over her. The fear and anger from the earlier incident dissipate, replaced by a clarity of purpose. She mentally visualizes each step of the complex surgery she is about to perform. "Let's review the procedure one last time," Sabrina calls to her team. As they discuss the technical details, the atmosphere in the room shifts. Professionalism overtakes the earlier doubts, and a sense of unity settles in. Before entering the operating room, Sabrina pauses, closing her eyes for a moment. She thinks of Lucas, of Officer Miller, of herself. "May compassion guide my hands," she whispers, a silent prayer before facing the challenge that awaits her. With Lucas already anesthetized and positioned on the operating table, Sabrina begins the final preparation procedures. Her experienced eyes scan the monitors, checking the patient's vital signs. Something catches her attention, a subtle but significant anomaly. "Dr. Carlos, do you see this?" she asks, pointing to a reading on the heart monitor. The anesthesiologist steps closer, frowning. "Yes, there's a slight arrhythmia. It's not uncommon under anesthesia, but—" Sabrina is already in motion, requesting additional tests. "I need an echocardiogram immediately," she orders, her voice calm but urgent. The team mobilizes quickly. Tense minutes pass as the test is performed. Sabrina watches the images on the screen intently, her heart racing as her suspicion is confirmed. My God, she murmurs. He has an undiagnosed heart malformation. The revelation hits the operating room like a bomb. This unexpected complication drastically increases the risks of the procedure. Dr. Rodrigo, the assistant surgeon, voices what everyone is thinking. This changes everything, Dr. Oliveira. The stress of the neurological surgery might be too much for his heart. Sabrina closes her eyes for a moment, her mind racing to assess all the implications. She knows she has seconds to make a decision that could mean life or death for Lucas. We have two options, she says, looking at her team. We can abort the surgery now, which means the neurological issue will remain untreated, or we can proceed, aware of the increased risks. The tension in the room is palpable. Every team member understands the gravity of the situation. What is your recommendation, Dr. Oliveira? Asks Dr. Amanda, her voice trembling slightly. Sabrina takes a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. She thinks of Officer Miller, anxiously waiting outside, unaware of the new danger his son faces. Let's proceed, she finally decides. But with extreme caution, Dr. Carlos, I need you to monitor his heart as if your own life depended on it. Dr. Rodrigo, be prepared for any complications. Let's save this boy. With that declaration, Sabrina prepares to start the most challenging surgery of her career, knowing that every move she makes could mean the difference between life and death. The rhythmic sound of the heart monitor fills the operating room, a constant reminder of the delicate balance between life and death. Sabrina, with steady hands and a focused mind, begins the neurological procedure. Every move is calculated, every incision precise. The tension in the room is palpable, with the entire team on high alert. Minutes turn into hours as Sabrina carefully navigates Lucas's brain. The silence is broken only by the constant beeping of the monitors and the occasional request for instruments. Dr. Carlos keeps a vigilant eye on the vital signs, ready to alert to any changes in the heart rhythm. Suddenly, an alarm sounds. Pressure dropping, announces Dr. Carlos, his voice tense. Sabrina freezes momentarily, her gaze fixed on the surgical field. Stabilize him, she orders, her voice calm, masking the internal storm of worry. As the team works to normalize Lucas's vital signs, Sabrina quickly assesses the situation. She is at a critical point in the surgery where retreating could be as dangerous as proceeding. Dr. Oliveira, calls Dr. Rodrigo. Maybe we should consider closing and trying again when he's more stable. Sabrina shakes her head, beads of sweat trickling down under her surgical cap. We can't stop now. If we close, we might cause irreversible damage. The next few minutes are an intense battle. Sabrina works with superhuman concentration, her precise movements contrasting with the chaos of alarms and tense voices around her. She knows she is walking a tightrope, with Lucas's life literally in her hands. I'm almost there, she murmurs, more to herself than to the others. Just a few more minutes. The heart monitor emits another shrill alarm. Fibrillation, shouts Dr. Carlos. Time seems to freeze. Sabrina knows she has seconds to make a decision that will determine Lucas's fate. Her mind races, evaluating options, calculating risks. She thinks of Officer Miller, the parking lot incident, the injustice and fear she felt. But above all, she thinks of the young man lying on the table before her, whose life depends entirely on her at this moment. With a calmness that surprises even herself, Sabrina makes her decision. Prepare the defibrillator, she orders. I will finish this procedure in 60 seconds. Be ready. Time seems to stretch as Sabrina makes the final moves of the surgery with an almost supernatural precision. Her team watches in tense silence, barely daring to breathe. Done, she announces, stepping away from the table. Now. The sound of the defibrillator filling the room marks the start of a new battle. As the team fights to revive Lucas, Sabrina removes her bloodied gloves, her eyes never leaving the heart monitor. The erratic beeping of the heart monitor is the only thing that breaks the tense silence. Everyone in the operating room is frozen, their eyes fixed on the line that represents Lucas's life. Sabrina feels her own heart pounding, a silent prayer on her lips. Seconds drag on like hours, and then a regular beep. Stable. Strong. A collective sigh of relief fills the room. Sabrina closes her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the weight of what has just happened. "Great job, team," she says, her voice hoarse with emotion and exhaustion. "Let's close and get him to recovery." As the team finalizes the procedure, Sabrina allows herself a moment of reflection. She saved Lucas's life, but she knows the journey is far from over. Now, she will have to face Officer Miller again, this time not as an unjustly accused suspect, but as the savior of his son. With one last look at Lucas, now stable and out of danger, Sabrina prepares to leave the operating room. She knows that what comes next will be as challenging as the surgery she just performed, but in a completely different way. With a deep sigh, she heads for the door, ready to face whatever fate has in store for her outside. Sabrina's hands move with precision over Lucas's exposed brain, but her mind wanders, transporting her decades back. The antiseptic smell of the operating room mixes with the memory of the jasmine aroma from her childhood backyard. She sees herself, an 8-year-old girl, her curly hair tied in elaborate braids, running through the narrow streets of her community. The midday sun shines on the tin roofs, and the distant sound of samba echoes through the alleys. Sabrina passes by Donna Maria, who sells acarajé on the corner, waving cheerfully. Little Sabrina stops in front of a dusty shop window, her eyes shining as she sees an anatomy book. She presses her nose against the glass, fascinated by the colorful illustrations of organs and bones. "One day," she whispers to herself, "I'll be a doctor and take care of everyone here." The scene changes. Now she's sitting on her father's shoulders, Jorge, a tall and strong man with a gentle smile. They are at a peaceful protest, signs raised demanding improvements for the community. Sabrina feels the pride and determination of her father vibrating through her. "Remember, my flower," Jorge's voice echoes in her memory. "Our fight is for justice, not for revenge. Always use your knowledge to help, never to harm." Back in the operating room, Sabrina blinks, pushing away the tears that threaten to form. She looks at Lucas, so vulnerable on the operating table, and feels the weight of her father's words. With renewed determination, she continues the procedure, each movement a silent tribute to the dream her father helped nurture. As Sabrina continues to operate, more memories flood her mind, revealing a painful truth long buried. The image of her father, Jorge, returns with full force. But this time the scene is dark and distressing. She sees herself as a 15-year-old teenager, helplessly watching as police officers storm their house on a rainy night. Leading them is a young Officer Miller, his face hardened by misguided determination. "Jorge Oliveira, you are under arrest for suspected drug trafficking." Miller's voice echoes in Sabrina's memory. She relives the horror of seeing her father, a respected community activist, handcuffed and dragged out of the house. "It's a mistake," Jorge shouts, his eyes locking with Sabrina's. "Take care of your mother, my flower. The truth will come out." In the days that followed, Sabrina discovered the terrible truth. Miller, eager for a promotion, had fabricated evidence against Jorge. The community rallied, protesting the injustice, but the system failed them. Jorge spent 2 years in prison before the truth finally came to light. Back in the present, Sabrina feels a wave of conflicting emotions. Anger, sadness, and a fierce determination swirl in her chest. She looks at Lucas, the son of the man who temporarily destroyed her family, and feels the weight of fate's irony. For a moment, her hand trembles over the surgical field. The temptation to let resentment guide her actions is almost overwhelming. But then, her father's voice resonates in her mind. Use your knowledge to help, never to harm. Sabrina takes a deep breath, pushing away the turbulent emotions. She is a doctor now, sworn to save lives. With renewed resolve, she continues the surgery, determined to honor her father's legacy through her actions, not through revenge. As Sabrina advances in the delicate operation, her trained eyes catch something unusual in Lucas's brain structures. A subtle anomaly, almost imperceptible to less experienced eyes, catches her attention. She pauses, her heart racing with recognition. "Dr. Carlos," she calls, her voice tense. "I need a complete blood analysis now." As she waits for the results, Sabrina carefully examines the preoperative MRI images. Her mind works furiously, connecting dots that previously seemed disconnected. The heart arrhythmia, the subtle brain malformation, everything begins to make terrible sense. The test results arrive, confirming her suspicions. Lucas suffers from an extremely rare genetic condition, one that affects less than 1 in a million people. This condition not only complicates the current surgery, but also has long-term implications for Lucas's health. Sabrina feels the weight of the discovery. This is not just a surgical complication. It's a life sentence that will change Lucas's future and that of his family forever. The condition requires constant monitoring, specialized treatments, and could significantly limit his life expectancy. The operating room falls silent as Sabrina processes the information. She knows that every decision she makes from this moment on will not only affect the immediate outcome of the surgery, but also the course of Lucas's life. "Team," she finally speaks, her voice firm despite the gravity of the situation. "We need to adjust our approach. This surgery just became much more complex." As she begins to detail the necessary changes to the procedure, Sabrina can't help but think of the cruel irony of fate. The son of the man who unjustly imprisoned her father now depends on her not only to survive this surgery, but also to navigate a future filled with medical challenges. The shock of the revelation hits Sabrina like a wave, almost causing her to stagger. Her hands, normally steady, tremble slightly as she processes the information. The rare genetic condition that afflicts Lucas is painfully familiar to her. Flashbacks flood her mind. She sees herself as a young medical student, poring over books and scientific articles, desperately searching for answers to her father's mysterious illness. Even after his unjust imprisonment, Jorge never fully recovered his health. Unexplained symptoms plagued him: memory lapses, occasional tremors, intermittent heart problems. Sabrina remembers the sleepless nights spent comforting her mother as her father suffered from inexplicable pain. The doctors were baffled, unable to provide a definitive diagnosis. It was this search for answers that, in part, drove Sabrina to specialize in neurosurgery. Now, looking at Lucas on the operating table, Sabrina sees not just Miller's son, but a reflection of her own father's suffering. The condition, so rare that most doctors would never encounter it in their entire careers, was there before her, like a cruel echo of the past. A whirlwind of emotions assaults her. Compassion for the young patient, who will face challenges similar to those of her father. Renewed anger against Miller, whose unjust action deprived Jorge of years of proper treatment, and a fierce determination to do what could not be done for her father, offer hope and healing. Sabrina takes a deep breath, centering herself. She knows that her personal experience with the condition, though painful, has uniquely equipped her for this moment. Her years of research, motivated by love for her father, could now save the life of the son of her tormentor. "Dr. Carlos," she calls, her voice heavy with contained emotion. "We need to adjust the protocol. I know this condition better than I'd like." As she begins to detail the necessary modifications to the procedure, Sabrina feels the weight of responsibility and the irony of fate. The knowledge born from her personal pain will now become the instrument of salvation for Lucas. Sabrina finds herself facing a devastating ethical dilemma. Her hands continue to work with precision on Lucas's brain, but her mind is in turmoil. The discovery of the rare genetic condition is not just a medical complication. It's an ethical time bomb. She knows that revealing the exact nature of Lucas's condition could open doors to groundbreaking research. With so few documented cases, every new patient identified is crucial to advancing understanding and treatment of the disease. Publishing a case study on Lucas could potentially save countless lives in the future. However, the price of that revelation is too high. Exposing Lucas's condition would inevitably raise questions about the family history of the disease. Deeper investigations could easily lead to her father Jorge's medical records. Sabrina envisions the sensationalist headlines: "Activist unjustly imprisoned suffered from rare disease." Her father's case would be reopened, exposing him and the entire family to unwanted public scrutiny. The injustice Jorge suffered would be relived, reopening old wounds and possibly compromising the peace he had finally found. Moreover, there is the issue of Officer Miller. Revealing Lucas's condition would mean informing Miller of the unexpected connection between the two families. How would he react upon learning that the man he unjustly accused shared a rare condition with his own son? Sabrina feels the weight of future lives in her hands. How many people could be helped if she shared this knowledge? But at what cost to her family? To her father, who has already suffered so much? "Dr. Oliveira, Doctor." Amanda's voice pulls her out of her thoughts. "We need a decision on the next step." Sabrina looks at her team, then at Lucas. She knows that any choice she makes will have far-reaching consequences, not just for the patient in front of her, but potentially for countless others. With a heavy heart, she begins to formulate her response, knowing that this decision will haunt her for years, regardless of the path she chooses. In the observation room above the operating room, Officer John Miller sits rigidly, his eyes fixed on the scene below. Through the glass, he watches Dr. Sabrina Oliveira working tirelessly to save his son Lucas's life. The irony of the situation is not lost on him. Hours ago, he humiliated her publicly, and now she holds his son's fate in her skilled hands. As the surgery progresses, Miller feels a shift within himself. He watches Sabrina's dedication and expertise, noticing every precise movement, every quick and critical decision she makes. The realization begins to settle in. This woman, whom he so quickly judged and accused, is a highly skilled and dedicated professional. Memories of his past as a rookie cop flood his mind. He recalls numerous occasions when he made hasty judgments based on appearances, on ingrained prejudices he didn't even realize he had. Jorge Oliveira's case, in particular, resurfaces in his conscience, a case he had buried deep, but which now haunts him with painful clarity. Miller closes his eyes, feeling the weight of years of misguided decisions. He now sees how his desire to prove his worth as a cop led him to ignore evidence, to make assumptions based on stereotypes. The injustice he perpetuated against Jorge Oliveira echoes through the years, culminating in this moment of terrible irony. Opening his eyes, Miller looks at Sabrina again. He sees not just the doctor, but the daughter of the man he unjustly accused. Guilt and shame consume him, mixed with a deep respect for the woman who, despite everything, is fighting to save his son. "I was so wrong," he murmurs to himself, his voice choked with emotion. So terribly wrong. In that moment, Miller makes a silent decision. Regardless of the outcome of the surgery, he knows he has a long journey of redemption ahead. He needs to confront his prejudices, acknowledge the harm he caused, and work tirelessly to correct them. As the surgery continues, Miller remains vigilant, his silent prayers not just for his son, but also for the strength to face the hard truths about himself and his past. Time seems to freeze in the operating room as Sabrina faces the most crucial decision of her career. Lucas's heart monitor emits an irregular beep, a constant reminder of the fragility of the life in her hands. The rare genetic condition has complicated the procedure beyond any expectation, and now Sabrina faces a choice that could determine not only Lucas's fate but also her own. She looks at her team, their tense faces reflecting the gravity of the situation. Dr. Carlos, the anesthesiologist, waits anxiously for her decision, ready to adjust the medications as needed. Dr. Amanda, the young resident, watches with a mix of fear and admiration, knowing she is witnessing a moment that will define her understanding of medical ethics. Sabrina closes her eyes for a brief moment, allowing herself to feel the full weight of the situation. She thinks of her father, of Miller, of Lucas, and of all the future patients who could be affected by her decision. The knowledge she possesses about the rare condition, acquired through years of research motivated by her father's suffering, could be the key to saving Lucas, but using it would mean opening Pandora's box of ethical and personal issues. With a deep breath, Sabrina opens her eyes, her decision made. "Team," she announces, her voice firm and resolute, "we're going to proceed with the experimental protocol." A murmur of surprise runs through the room. "Doctor," Carlos raises an eyebrow. "Dr. Oliveira, are you sure? This procedure has never been tested in a situation like this." Sabrina nods, her eyes fixed on Lucas's exposed brain. "I'm sure. It's our best chance to save not only his life but also his future quality of life." She begins to detail the procedure to her team, explaining each step with a clarity that only comes from a deep personal understanding. As she speaks, Sabrina knows she is walking the thin line between medical innovation and personal exposure. "Dr. Amanda," she calls to the resident, "I want you to document every detail of this procedure. This may be crucial for future cases." As the team moves with renewed energy, preparing for the untested procedure, Sabrina feels a mix of fear and determination. She is about to use all the knowledge she gained through her family's pain to save the son of the man who caused that pain. In the observation room, Miller watches the scene unfold, unaware of Sabrina's internal battle or the true revolutionary nature of what is about to happen. He sees only a brilliant doctor doing the impossible to save his son. Sabrina, with steady hands and a racing heart, begins the procedure. She knows that her actions in the next few minutes will not only determine Lucas's fate, but could also change the course of medicine and inevitably expose long-buried secrets. As she works, a sense of purpose envelops her. Regardless of the personal consequences, she is honoring the oath she took as a doctor and her father's legacy. With each precise movement, Sabrina writes a new chapter, not only in medical history, but also in the complex narrative that binds her family to Miller's. The tension in the room is palpable as everyone watches, waiting to see if Sabrina's bold decision will be the miracle everyone hopes for or a risk that will cost too much. The video of the confrontation between Sabrina and Officer Miller goes viral on social media. Shared thousands of times within minutes, the footage clearly shows Miller's unjust and aggressive treatment of the respected neurosurgeon. Hashtags like "Justice for Sabrina" and "Police Racism" become trending topics. Outraged comments flood the platforms, with people from across the country expressing anger and demanding action. The incident quickly transcends the local area, becoming a symbol of the fight against institutional prejudice and abuse of power. Online pressure mounts, forcing authorities and traditional media to address the case. As the news spreads, A crowd begins to gather in front of the hospital. What starts with a few local activists quickly grows to hundreds of protesters. Improvised signs demand justice for Sabrina and condemn police racism. Chants echo through the street, "No to discrimination," and "Sabrina, we're with you." The atmosphere is tense but peaceful, with protesters of all ages and ethnicities united in solidarity. Police cars arrive to monitor the situation, increasing the tension. Hospital staff nervously watch from the windows, worried about the impact on patients. The news of Lucas Miller's surgery by Dr. Sabrina spreads rapidly through the community. The irony of the situation is not lost on anyone. The wronged doctor now fights to save the life of her aggressor's son. Heated conversations erupt in the streets, cafes, and local social networks. Some see it as an opportunity for redemption, others as a cruel twist of fate. Stories of Sabrina's past in the community resurface, increasing admiration for her integrity. The complexity of the situation challenges simplistic opinions, provoking deep debates about forgiveness, professional duty, and social justice. Community leaders call an impromptu press conference on the hospital steps. Pastors, activists, and neighborhood association representatives unite their voices in a chorus of indignation. They demand not only Officer Miller's immediate dismissal, but also a full investigation into discriminatory practices within the police department. They call for public apologies to Dr. Sabrina and compensation for the trauma she endured. Pressure on municipal authorities intensifies, with threats of broader protests if demands are not met. Sabrina's case becomes a turning point for long-needed systemic changes. Investigative journalists delve into Officer Miller's past, uncovering a disturbing pattern of behavior. Records of previous complaints, hushed up or ignored, come to light. Former colleagues, protected by anonymity, reveal a culture of prejudice within the department. Statistics of police stops in the community are analyzed, revealing significant racial disparities. The investigation expands, examining similar cases across the country. Miller's case becomes a microcosm of broader issues of police reform and racial justice, attracting national attention and sparking debates on necessary systemic changes. Inside the operating room, Sabrina remains intensely focused on saving Lucas's life. The clinical silence is broken only by the beeping of monitors and occasional instructions to the team. Completely absorbed in the delicate operation, she has no idea of the turmoil unfolding beyond the hospital walls. Her concentration is total, every move precise and calculated. The irony of the situation, her fighting to save the son of the man who humiliated her, does not distract her from her duty as a doctor. To Sabrina, at this moment, there is only the patient and the mission to preserve a life. A former partner of Miller, consumed by guilt, comes forward with a bombshell revelation. He confesses that Miller deliberately falsified evidence in several cases, including Sabrina's father's, to boost his arrest stats. Supporting documents are handed over to the press, exposing years of misconduct. The news hits like an earthquake, shaking public confidence in the police. Miller's case is no longer an isolated incident, but a scandal. Higher authorities are implicated in covering up Miller's actions, leading to calls for a federal investigation. The tension in the operating room reaches its peak. Lucas's heart monitor emits intermittent alarms, signaling increasing complications. Sabrina finds herself facing an agonizing dilemma. Proceed with a risky procedure that could save Lucas but potentially compromise her medical ethics, or opt for a more conservative approach that may not be enough. Every second weighs like lead. She looks at her team, their faces reflecting the gravity of the situation. The decision Sabrina is about to make will not only determine Lucas's fate, but also her own professional and personal future. In the observation room, Miller watches the scene with a mix of terror and admiration. His eyes are fixed on Sabrina, watching every precise movement, every quick decision she makes. The gravity of the situation hits him with full force. He realizes Perhaps for the first time, the true meaning of Sabrina's professionalism and dedication. The irony does not escape him. The woman he unjustly accused hours ago now fights tirelessly to save his son. A feeling of shame and regret invades him, mixed with growing admiration for the doctor he so quickly judged. In the middle of the surgery, Sabrina faces a shocking revelation. The only way to save Lucas involves an experimental procedure she developed in secret, inspired by her father's condition. Using this unapproved technique could result in the loss of her medical license. She hesitates, the weight of the decision overwhelming. On one hand, the chance to save a young life. On the other, the risk of destroying everything she has worked for. The irony of the situation strikes her. Sacrificing her career for the son of the man who publicly humiliated her. Sabrina feels the conflict between her duty as a doctor and her self-preservation. As Sabrina ponders her decision, flashbacks invade her mind. She sees herself as a young medical student, constantly questioned about her abilities. She remembers patients asking to see the real doctor, ignoring her presence. She relives moments when colleagues attributed her success to quotas, not to her merit. Each memory is a pinprick, reminding her of the barriers she overcame. These moments of subtle discrimination shaped her determination but also left scars. Now, faced with Lucas, Sabrina sees an opportunity to transcend that past, proving her worth not through words but decisive actions. Doctor. Oliveira, we need a decision now. Dr. Carlos's urgent voice cuts through the tense air of the operating room. All eyes on the team are fixed on Sabrina, awaiting her guidance. Lucas's heart monitor emits increasingly erratic beeps, an audible reminder of time running out. Sabrina feels the weight of every passing second. She knows that any further hesitation could cost Lucas his life. The pressure is overwhelming. Each team member ready to act but paralyzed without her final word. Sabrina takes a deep breath, preparing to announce a decision that will change lives. With surprising calm, Sabrina looks at her team and announces, "We're going ahead with the experimental procedure." A murmur of shock runs through the room. She continues, her voice firm, "And I will document every step. If this costs me my career, so be it, but I will not lose a life out of fear." The determination in her eyes silences any objections. Sabrina begins to detail the innovative procedure, based on years of personal research. The team, though hesitant, quickly mobilizes. At that moment, Sabrina transcends the role of doctor, becoming a pioneer willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to save a life. The following hours are a roller coaster of tension and hope. When Sabrina finally steps back from the operating table, exhausted, the silence is deafening. Then, the heart monitor emits a stable beep. Lucas survived. The room erupts in a mix of relief and disbelief. But the repercussions are just beginning. News of the revolutionary procedure spreads rapidly. Sabrina faces an ethical investigation but also worldwide acclaim for her innovation. Miller, transformed by the experience, becomes a vocal advocate against police prejudice. The medical community is shaken, forced to reevaluate protocols in light of this unexpected breakthrough. What began as a surgery became a catalyst for profound personal and systemic changes.